The Public vs. Autistic Tony Stark by ajexists. Chapter 2. Taking Away Resources. Tony was left shaken after that day in the park. He came back to the tower and immediately went to take a shower. The interaction felt weird. It wasn't necessarily a bad interaction, he just felt sort of patronised. He felt like a child. The random touching when he didn't ask or give permission to do so, being told how to sign the autograph like he hasn't done so his whole life, and the comments she made. How many times did he have to say it? Disabled isn't a bad word. And being told that autism itself was his superpower. Sure, some of the things that make him a superhero are related to his autism, but that doesn't make autism a superpower like having super speed. At least, not to him. The lady also appeared to forget that he is an adult. A few days pass and Tony eventually decides to move past it. He can't let one weird conversation ruin his whole life. He mainly says this though because he needs some new clothes. Call him old-fashioned, but he still prefers to shop for clothes in person, even if he uses online shopping for most purchases nowadays. Well, maybe you don't have to call him old-fashioned anymore, now that Tony has been diagnosed. He believed that he was, but after learning he's autistic, he realised it's because of sensory issues. Tony had a lot of struggles with clothes growing up. Anything too tight or too scratchy would lead him to a sensory overload, or even a meltdown. For a while he had to learn to suck it up. Stark men don't cry when wearing clothes. Stark men don't cry, period. But once he turned 15 and went to college, at that point being seen as a grown-up to his father, he would go out and buy his own clothes. His favourite place to get his more casual clothes, which is what he was currently planning on buying, is at the mall. He's ripped into one of too many of the long-sleeve shirts he likes to wear under his t-shirts, so he has to get new ones. His jeans are starting to become more and more like ripped jeans, which he is not a fan of, so he has to get more of those too. Tony didn't really hate the mall. Sure, it could be busy at times, but he'd only get recognised by 2 or 3 people, which is extremely low compared to some other public places. He typically goes in more casual attire, today being one of the few good pairs of jeans he has left, along with an AC/DC t-shirt. He wears a hat and some sunglasses. He wears sunglasses in most indoor public places because good lord fluorescent lights make him want to die. And he's all good to go. Even though he typically buys the same brand of clothes every time, he still tries them on. He's had instances where they randomly change how they sew the seam and he has to find a different pair. It was awful when that happened. On a good day, he would stand there, take a few deep breaths, then go back and find another pair. On a bad day, he would end up crying in the dressing room stall, texting Happy or Pepper to pick him up. Again, back when he didn't know he was autistic, he felt humiliated by this. A grown man crying, asking his head of security and or girlfriend to come pick him up, all over some clothes. Now that he knows these are sensory issues, well, he still felt slightly humiliated, but at least he had an explanation now. Luckily though, both the shirt and pants stayed exactly the same. He bought the clothes and started heading back. He started heading back to his car when he walks by a store, stopping before it and staring inside. Every time he comes to the mall, he has to walk past the Laughing Place, a store in the mall that sells a bunch of fidgets. The store, more accurately the fidgets they sell, have always intrigued them. Sure, there are a lot of the same stim toys he's used to seeing, but there are a bunch in there he wanted to try. Keyboard clickers, Nido cubes, morph worms and so much more. Tony was nervous to go in before his diagnosis. What if someone recognised him? What would they think? But he's officially diagnosed now, and the whole world knows it. He decides, fuck it, and goes into the store. He walks in and feels immediately overwhelmed. There are just so many fidgets. He rubs his fingers together and looks around, deciding to look at the stims that piqued his interest in the first place. He wandered over to the keyboard clickers. Before he invented holograms, Tony had a weird hit or miss with keyboards. Sometimes the sound, or more often than not the feel of pressing the keys themselves would set him off. And while he enjoyed the sound of a clicky keyboard, the hit or miss made him switch to completely using holograms. When he heard about keyboard clickers, it intrigued him. He felt weird though asking Peter to get them for him. Or anyone, really. Peter just so happens to be the one buying him stims the most. And much like clothes, he wanted to try them out first before solidifying. He picked one up in a light purple shade and started to press his thumb against it. As soon as he started stimming with it, a man who was previously looking at a poppet came up to him and said, "My daughter loves those. She brings one with her everywhere." Why do people feel the need to come up to strangers and talk to them? That's cool. The man nodded, picking one up himself and asking, "Getting one for your kid?" Tony took a deep breath. "Own it. Don't hide away." "No, it's for myself." The man looked up at him with a slight glare, squinting his eyes. "You know these are for kids, right?" Tony squeezed his eyes shut. "Please, not again. Adults can use them too." "You're a functioning adult. You shouldn't—" "Oh." The man sighed, crossing his arms. "You're Tony Stark, aren't you?" Tony bit his cheek and nodded. "Yup." He swallowed the lump in his throat. "So, definitely not a functioning adult." "Well, it never appeared to be the case," the man said bluntly. "Sure, maybe you did some shit in the 90s that was stupid teenager stuff, but everyone does that." The man shook the fidget in his hand. "You don't need this. My daughter cannot function without this shit, man. You can run a whole damn company." "It's actually Pepper Potts who—" "Doesn't matter," he started to shout. "You're taking away resources from people who have it way worse than you. And why? Because you want to feel special?" Hey, what's going on?" An employee of the store, who must have heard the man's shouting, came over. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah," Tony whispered, voice cracking a bit. He set the keyboard clicker down and put his hands in his pockets. "I was just leaving." He glanced back at the man, who had a smirk on his face. The employee was saying something else, but he didn't hear it. He just left with his clothes, not getting another fidget. It was always hit or miss with keyboards. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Have a lovely day.